Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us so early. We'll try to reward your determination in joining us here at 8:45. And I think we have a pretty interesting panel, and for sure we have also a quite interesting and innovative topic, data protection as a corporate social responsibility. Today we want to start actually a conversation, potentially also with you, exchanging reflections on this new dimension of data protection as a corporate social responsibility, which is an additional step to compliance. Today, to speak about that, we have first and foremost Cosimo Monda from ECPC, the European Center on Privacy and Cybersecurity. He's going to share with you some introductory remarks, followed by me, Paolo Balboni, also from the European Center on Privacy and Cybersecurity, Sophie Norbonne from the CNIL, the French Data Protection Authority, Stefano Fratta from Meta, Sara Bakir from Rabobank, and Massimo Marelli from ICRC, the International Red Cross. So without any further ado, I will leave the floor to Cosimo Monda.
Thank you, Paolo. I will be very brief because I don't want to buy time for distinguished panelists here. As Paolo said, we will talk about something which is probably new, corporate social responsibility. We have devoted on the center 2 years on this project. I think this is the final results of this work. We have a stand. We can visit us if you want to have one. We have some in the room. We spent 2 years. Now we are in the phase of implementing the guidelines, how company and organization they can implement the corporate social responsibility guidelines in their own organization. But now, let me start by making a clear statement at the beginning. There is a lot of tension, confusion in organization. Often we do see that data protection, privacy, it's more perceived as a burden, an administrative burden, lacking of resource, lacking of financial, both financial and human resource. And of course, it's become a little bit complicated for organization and company to meet the requirements which are dictated, at least in Europe, by the GDPR. And we keep in say, whenever we talk with organization and company, actually they do have to perceive data protection not as a burden, but as basically as an element of good governance. You know, data processing operations have become more complex, technology is embedded, artificial intelligence is also there very often, which is somehow may create a problem to two fundamental rights of the individual, a part of privacy data protection, which is the individual autonomy, basically. People have the right to take control of their data somehow and to be treated fair whenever they are processing data about themselves. Now, it's become clear that also the liability curve of the controller, it's evolving. You know, in the past we were talking about data management, data governance. Now we are talking more about responsible use of the data. And why this? Because if years ago, the responsibility of the controller was more a kind of a stewardship role, making sure that they are protecting the data which they are collecting and are processing. Now, with technology, which somehow hit very hard the individual autonomy of the individual, it's more a fiduciary role. And this is something which we need to take into account when we talk about privacy data protection. So, for many companies, it becomes clear that privacy is not just about compliance, but it's really a business priority. It's also create opportunity. Through the study which we have done, Professor Paolo Balboni has done, it's clearly shown that there is a competitive advantage. Protecting the privacy of the individual will lead to a competitive advantage into the market. And this is not something which is only related to the business, to the private sector, but it's also closely related with the public sector too. Because at the end of the day, what is it important? It's the trust. How you can gain the trust of the individual if you do not protect their fundamental rights and interests. And now, as I say, if for the private sector this can be translated in increase the revenue. For the public sector, the principle of accountability, not to the accountability in the sense of the GDPR, but the general accountability, governor has to be accountable to govern the people, it's clearly there. That means also public sector has everything to gain by implemented and by comply with privacy and data protection in their organization whenever they manage data. Now, if you think for a moment, just my last remark, and then I would like to hear from the panelists what do they think. Of course, how do we use data controller? Controller, they use the data in two different ways, basically. They use the data to predict the future by thinking with the data, analyze the data, big analytics is there. But at the same time, with artificial intelligence embedded in data processing operation, of course, they also acting with the data. Basically, what they do, they make decisions for the other. And this is why, again, this responsibility of the controller is evolving. Now, how you can balance this loss of individual accountability and making sure the fairness principle, which is also a principle which is, depends where you are, it cannot be really defined, but I do believe that when we talk about fairness, we are talking about impact. What kind of impact you can generate on people by processing their data. Now, do we see in this analysis that corporate social responsibility actually can be one of the elements of the accountability by making sure that you increase and you boost the trust of the people on your services, and on the other side, benefit of the organization. Now, I will stop here. If you don't mind, I think I already gave some food for thought. And I will leave it to Professor Paolo Balboni, who will have a presentation about the outcome and the finding of this study, research. Please, Paolo.
Thank you very much, Cosimo. So in these 10 minutes, what I'm going to try to do is to give you a little bit more of insights related to the research project that we have carried out in the last 2 years at Maastricht University. A little bit of history. I think everything started with the GDPR reform, where it became clear that for organizations, the GDPR would bring quite a lot of burden in terms of investing in privacy, and therefore you needed to find a reason to invest so much in privacy, which is also the respect of fundamental rights and freedoms of the data subject, but also a business reason in order to make the organization understand that they can have a return on investment. So we started to look at privacy as an asset, as a possible competitive advantage when it was 2016, and we started to see, how the reform was shaping. So a few years later, actually, when I gave my inaugural lecture as professor of privacy, cybersecurity, and IT contract at Maastricht University within the center, the European Center on Privacy and Cybersecurity, I started to think about what is the next level of competition on the market. And I truly started to believe that we needed to go beyond compliance. We need to capture legal obligation, but also ethical obligation. 2-3 years ago, the discussion about ethics and privacy was booming, led by the DPS. Former DPS Buttarelli invested a lot in this kind of concept, tried to share that idea, and I think it captured completely this new dimension where data should be processed in a responsible way. So I've carried out some research back in time and isolate already 5 principles of data protection as a corporate social responsibility. And for me, corporate social responsibility was the link between a legal compliance and ethical behavior within privacy and data protection. So the whole story of this research started like this, and 2 years later, so 2 years ago, we started officially this research, and we completed it in March this year. And we have produced this preliminary booklet that you see here, and you will also see at our stand. And there is a bigger publication, so the full research that is going to be published shortly within this year. But let's get a little bit more into the issue. So what we have discovered by doing research is that regardless of complying with the legal obligations set forth in the GDPR, but also in the Privacy Directive as implemented in the local member states, you can still create harm to individuals. You can process personal data, for example, based on consent. Then we can discuss whether that consent is freely given, whether it is really informed. You can do things by the book or sustain that your compliance posture with legal obligation is there. But still, by way of analytics, especially smart analytics, you can create discrimination for individuals. You can create harm for individuals, and so on and so forth. So we wanted to capture this additional dimension of processing personal data in a responsible way. So basically, shift this additional responsibility again on organization, and we are thinking especially large organizations, corporations, but also international organizations. So this is the issue, and the solution that we are proposing, and we are here among scholars, and I would like very much to capture here or offline. Please feel free to write me directly your feedback on this research. The one that we have published is freely available on the website of the ECPC, and it's around about 80 pages. The total research will be some 150 pages that, as I mentioned, we're going to publish soon. The first year, we isolate 5 principles and 15 rules. The second year of research, we kept and confirmed those 5 principles, but we expanded the rules to 5 rules per principle, totaling 25 rules. The scope of those rules is that they will become controls, and the controls will become auditable. So to give certainty and give the possibility to external auditors to measure how corporations or international organizations can process personal data according to data protection as a corporate social responsibility. So here you see it's fairly small, the 5 principles and the 25 rules. I'm not going to go into the details of each and every of them, but I give you a little bit of the flavor of what we mean by data protection as a corporate social responsibility. So principle 1, embed data protection, fairness, and security in the design of process. So we all know Article 25 of the GDPR, data protection by design and by default. We wanted to call organization to go one step beyond that. Also embedding data security by design. We all know that in organizations, sometimes data security, information security is dealt with in a separate way with respect to data protection compliance. So here we call upon an integrated approach on privacy and cybersecurity, information security, within the design of products and services, and we provide methodologies for that. But we also remind the organization to keep business and processes user-centric, always thinking with the individual at the center. We have developed a test to carry out what we call fairness by design, which is, I think, very important when you talk about smart algorithms and artificial intelligence. And we also introduced 2 additional principles, which is loyalty and solidarity. It is very important that when controllers process personal data, they will feel entrusted by consumers, data subject, that they entrust them with their data beyond what is legally necessary, to have a fair processing activities, to avoid that any processing activity will lead to discrimination or hampering of their rights and freedoms. Then we go to the second principle. The second principle is about transparency. Transparency before the processing, during the processing as well, and making sure that you use alternative language and means to convey fundamental information to individuals. Therefore, under this principle, we have developed icons, Icons that actually we were lucky enough to win a contest in Italy that was organized by the Italian Data Protection Authority. The contest was about creating icons to show the necessary elements of information that controllers need to share with individuals according to Article 13, direct collection from individuals, and 14th, indirect collection from individuals. So we have created icons for that, and we propose them in our framework. But we also went one step beyond, and we also create icons for what we think are risky data processing activities. You will see them in a minute. Principle number 3 is about balancing profit with the actual benefit for individuals. We have created a test so that companies can showcase that they are making money on data, there is nothing wrong with that, but also creating benefit for individual. One thing that is very important, compliance is given, okay? So we're not suggesting that companies should put in place unlawful data processing activity. Compliance is the baseline. On top of that, we want organizations to share with consumers data subjects in a clear way how they balance profit with benefits for individuals. Principle 4 is about data sharing, publishing findings, possibly in an aggregated way, in order to improve our society. So we have a business-to-consumer data sharing. We have business-to-business data sharing among participants in the same domain. For example, one of our stakeholders in this project is a car manufacturer. And we thought, together with this car manufacturer, that would be very beneficial to share information between car manufacturers in order to improve road safety, for example. But it's also business-to-government data sharing in order to enable governments to deal with critical situations like the COVID pandemic. And last but not least, business-to-humanitarian organization data sharing. This is also another very important point, and therefore here in the panel we have also Massimo Marelli from the ICRC. And one last data sharing is about business-to-research, in order to try to solve this annual issue, which is related to sharing data for the development of academic research. Last principle is about devoting a portion of revenues to awareness campaign. We feel that there is still not enough knowledge, especially in the teenagers, with related to privacy and data protection. But also on the opposite, we want to create awareness in new generations that if they give data, they should also have something back. And I'm not talking about discounts, money back. I'm talking about improvement of services, of their experience, eventually of their life, in a way that is socially responsible in our whole environment. And therefore, we have also created 5 rules around this idea of having organizations participating directly and showcasing, for example, in their sustainability report, what they do concretely in order to improve awareness of the stakeholders. So we have developed this study together with data protection stakeholders. For example, the CNIL was actively participating, but also the Dutch Data Protection Authority, the ICO, so the UK Data Protection Authority, but also data protection authorities from outside the European Union, like the Brazilian Data Protection Authority. We had the intergovernmental stakeholders. We had, for example, European agency, like the European Space Agency. We also have business stakeholders. One of them was the Rabobank, also represented here by Sarah Bakir. We have some testimonies from people working at supervisory authorities or, for example, from ENISA. ENISA was also one of the data protection stakeholders that we have heavily involved in the first principle, which is related to data security. They found the result of this research a meaningful result. Of course, all of you and the whole community will decide eventually whether this is something useful or not. We truly hope so, and we keep working on that. Here are the icons that we have developed, and they are freely available under a license that gives everybody the possibility to use the icons and to adapt the icons to the look and feel of their corporate or organizational website. These are the Article 13 and 14 icons. These are the 6 icons for what we call risky data processing activities, so signaling immediately the data subject about marketing, fully automated processing, transfer of personal data outside the European Economic Area to country without an adequacy decision, data sharing in exchange of profit or value, processing of sensitive data, also capturing financial data, geolocation data, and so on and so forth, like according to the guidelines of the former Article 29 Working Party on data protection impact assessment, and systematic monitoring, which can also be systematic monitoring through cookies and tracking technologies. We have been proud of being inserted in one of the last publications of ENISA as well, the data protection engineering, as an example of improving transparency through our icons, which fits into our principle number 3. And what is the future? What we're going to do? So we're going to establish a permanent stakeholder group made of data protection authorities, again, intergovernmental organizations and European agencies, and also businesses and international organizations. So if you are willing to participate in this permanent stakeholder group, just drop me an email. The whole idea is that the permanent stakeholder group will act as a community. We're going to further develop this framework. We're going to test the framework. We're going to consolidate and write together, way to apply and make this framework auditable and feasible for organization. At the end, of course, for the true benefit of the protection of data subject rights, which is the core of all our research. So we want to make effective protection of the rights and freedoms of individuals compatible with business needs and create a sort of enhanced competition around this concept of data protection as corporate social responsibility. Also leveraging this big hype of ESG and all the interest of investment funds in sustainable business, but also millennials are looking for more sustainable providers of goods and services. So we have opened up the adherence possibility. You can refer to the website of the ECPC. All organizations can qualify themselves as a possible adherent organization to this framework. The first year is about a self-declaration of compliance. The second year will be about third-party audit on this very specific framework. We are also developing seals in order to show who is adhering and complying with this framework, so that organization can showcase this extra effort and potentially have a return on investment. Thank you very much. We will keep all the questions at the end of the presentations, because now we want to develop a little bit of presentations and debate with these highly esteemed colleagues. Thank you very much for your attention. Sophie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to share our views on this very enthusiastic project, because as regulators, we know that there is no silver bullet to implement the GDPR. And what is very interesting is to see the combination of different approaches to gain this objective. And more, we can consider that CRS is very linked with GDPR. So, as a regulator, we intend to pursue a balanced strategy between pedagogical approach to help private and public sector to implement and to be, of course, compliant. And the other part will be the repressive action. And we know that the sanctions will be more and more high. So it's more and more important to get this change of culture and not only the very bureaucratic approach of that some consider to be the GDPR. We what was very interesting in this project when we were approached by Paolo is the promotion of icons, because that is promoted by the GDPR as a way to make things more simple, easily understandable, and with our contribution, what was quite interesting during the last year of the work, because we joined at that moment, was exchanging views, discussing practical experience, which I believe is extremely important, even if the final deliverables do not represent the point of view of the CNIL. That was not the purpose, but it doesn't commit the CNIL in any way. But we are working with other parties on such projects. For example, in France, France Stratégie at the governmental as a governmental institution was making a report on what they call the corporate digital responsibility. But in fact, that's same ideas, but less developed and implemented as a precise project. We approach the financial supervisors because more and more we are speaking about the sustainable financing. So notation agencies as Moody's, Standard & Poor's are already implementing some criteria about GDPR and ethical rules, because that's really linked. And of course, we can see that obviously CSR and GDPR requires, under the same principles, some loyalty, relevance, transparency, information on the means of the processing, and effective exercise of the rights that we need to develop. I would like to perhaps make a focus on what is on the table at the moment with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. As you may know, this new directive will replace in less than 2 years the non-financial reporting directive. And this new text will reinforce the EU's objectives in terms of sustainable finance by extending the requirements to companies with more than 250 employees, and by improving the content of extra financial reports with, in particular, a simplified reporting process with the interoperability of ESG criteria. And the EFRAG, which is the European Financial Advisory Group, is responsible for developing a uniform standard to remedy the plurality of current standards existing at the moment, which make things, of course, difficult to get more flesh to the bone of these CRR principles. And such an European standard is a very structuring element for us. And I think that all the stakeholders are waiting for something like that. So what we are thinking of is to push the explicit introduction of the protection of, and security of personal data in that future standard, because we think that that would contribute to the long-term resilience of the economy and the increased accountability of issuers in that aspect. And so that's all actions and criteria would be very close to what we find in this research done, speaking about privacy by design, publication of data protection policies, summaries of privacy impact assessments, a number of data leaks to be declared to the public, security investments, And we think that the introduction of this item would be without additional cost, as the investments necessary for the implementation of the GDPR have already been made or must be made. And at the contrary, that would be an opportunity to promote them, to benefit from positive reputational effects with citizens and increased customer confidence. That's what we are looking for, and we are considering that it's good not to work in silo and have this pluridisciplinary approach. We can see that more and more that's the direction that EU is taking, and so it's why this project was so interesting to follow, and we will go on this side.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Let's now go to Massimo.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you, Paolo. So many of you already know me and the Red Cross, and may be wondering what the ICRC is doing on a corporate social responsibility debate and discussion. Many of you, however, don't necessarily know the ICRC, so I thought I'll just mention very briefly what the ICRC is and what it does. The International Committee of the Red Cross is a neutral, impartial, and independent organization that has an exclusively humanitarian mission to protect the life and the dignity of people affected by conflicts and violence. So basically, we're active in all conflict areas that you can think of, in war zones and so on, to protect and assist people, provide aid, humanitarian relief, health services, and so on. And so yes, it may be interesting to see how an organization of this type fits with reflections of this type. And for a start, I was very curious when I heard about this initiative, because anything that comes out of the brains of Cosimo, Paolo, and Joyce in Maastricht is bound to be a great idea. But there are also some things that make it, in my mind, particularly relevant also for humanitarian settings. Probably a humanitarian organization as such that really has a mandate to protect and exists in order to protect the life and dignity of people may not really necessarily fit itself in a CSR perspective already from the name of it. There are some concepts and notions that are intrinsic in data protection and on which data protection is based that speak a lot more from the inside to the objective of the organization, the dignity of the individual when their data has been processed, the notion of accountability vis-a-vis affected communities, the notion of agency. All these are, however, really at the heart of the framework that we have seen, and they can be an important tool to engage and connect with other stakeholders that are increasingly active in conflict zones and are increasingly active in humanitarian emergencies. There are some features in humanitarian action that make CSR particularly interesting, or data protection as CSR particularly interesting. Digital transformation, humanitarian action is taking place increasingly in areas that are connected and in areas that where technologies are being rolled out and used for the delivery of humanitarian action. So increasingly, humanitarian action is somehow intermediated. Humanitarian organizations use partnerships or services from the private sector to deliver cash or to deliver humanitarian aid in different forms. Through cloud services, the role of social media is very important in increasingly in humanitarian settings. So the fact that there are these interactions perhaps means that perhaps corporate social responsibility can be one of those bridges that really connect, where sometimes we have seen a bit of a disconnect between the humanitarian sector and the tech sector in enabling increased cooperation. There are some features in humanitarian settings make it particularly difficult to, well, not difficult, but actually where, we've been saying, is data protection compliance enough? And starting from the assumption that legal compliance is a fundamental tenet. It's not an alternative to legal compliance. It's actually something on top. Circumstances in humanitarian emergencies are so extreme that nothing is enough. So anything that can be brought in addition can be very interesting. So there are some features that make humanitarian settings particularly complicated. The pervasiveness of surveillance, for example, the political, religious, and ethnical tensions that often exist and that are at the origin of some of these difficulties, legal and policy safeguards that are often lacking. The fact that education and digital literacy can be very low. So as I was listening to some of these principles, it really clicked. The commitment to increase digital literacy, to invest, for example, in awareness, and there are some things that can be interesting also from the point of view of proactiveness in information. Of course, information is important already from a compliance perspective, but the fact that the risks are so high and the digital literacy levels are so potentially low in some contexts makes this enhanced transparency, the proactiveness in it, the proactive due diligence and enhanced due diligence and the prevention approach very important. So somehow there are three levels at which I could see the relevance of these principles and of really thinking of declining these principles in a specialized sector-specific framework. The first one is, should we think about tailoring it for humanitarian organizations themselves? To be discussed. As I mentioned earlier, there might be other concepts that probably speak more to humanitarian organizations than CSR itself. But actually, there are other levels where it could be highly relevant. As I mentioned, humanitarian organizations need to cooperate increasingly with the tech sector. And so as a bridge between these two worlds. And also, we shouldn't forget that the corporate sector is actually highly active independently in areas that are affected by conflicts and other situations of violence, and where the impact of the corporate sector, particularly in the tech sector, can be extremely high, both in positive and in negative terms. So if done wrongly. So that's where I think it could be really useful to connect and engage, to look at possibilities of framing this. So what can it be? Is it a useful lens to highlight that data protection is not a burden? I think it's more than that. It's really actually pushing for this proactiveness and this enhanced transparency and due diligence.
Thank you very much, Massimo. Let's now go to Stefano. Stefano has a video. Shall we play the video right now?
Yeah, I think it's good. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm asking the technicians. Yeah, thank you.
The problem in a pandemic is that you have to move fast and you have to go big.
We miss a lot of things. Together, our family, our grandmother, the kids go out of school, to meet together in the restaurant.
You cannot tackle a multidimensional crisis without a multidimensional tool. A lockdown is extremely costly, not only on mental health, but also for economic reasons. So the struggle was, what kind of data can we get to make sure that we're making this right? Mobility data that was timely, that was open, and for us that was actionable. And this is how we found the mobility data from Data for Good at Meta. And we have been able to guide policymakers and decision makers across sectors with that information to make smarter interventions and to get better results.
We worked with Facebook as a partner, as well as UNICEF and Public Good Project, to come up with this approach to address vaccine hesitancy through evidence-based approaches. And so these are tens of millions of people that are being reached through these messages and making the best decisions for themselves.
Shortly after the first COVID case was reported in Indonesia, we got access to Facebook Data for Good. Because Facebook allows us to have a real-time data, we as researchers and also policymakers might use that data to have a prompt response on a daily basis.
we decide to make that campaign ready para abrazarnos or ready for hugs, because that is our culture. Our culture is a hug, kiss, and friendship. Facebook is an extraordinary tool to share, amplify the vaccine story. We have the opportunity to design a strategy by group, by age, by community. When we find out the campaign, we put Puerto Rico in the first place of immunization in the country of US. That experience is wonderful for us and wonderful for the community too.
Facebook engineers and staff were active partners in this process.
They can inform social, environmental, and economic conditions and could be fundamental at the decision-making processes all over the world.
So good morning, everyone. I thought it was a lot faster and more accurate to actually give you a video rather than having me here explaining one of these initiatives. I think when we started discussing, the project and the idea of, corporate social responsibility, this program that Facebook has, Data for Good, it was the first thing that came to mind, if you want. I think it's a program that Meta has active since 2017. Initially, it was focused on rapid support during national disasters and disaster relief. And then the company expanded quickly from there. And now I think we have more than 600 partners in 80 countries and hundreds of different projects. And I think this sort of initiative already provided a very positive impact from an economic point of view on health issues, crisis response, and so on. And I think the reason why I wanted to highlight this project to you today in the context we're discussing, it that actually is one of the probably best example that fits within some of the guidelines that Paolo was highlighting before. And I'm going to try to give you very quickly an overview as to why. So if you go through the booklet and you look at the principle, you will see, for instance, there is one that is principle 4, publishing relevant findings based on statistical anonymized data to improve society. That is the project that you just saw. That is what we do with Data for Good. And it's both, as you see in the booklet, there is both a B2G and a B2R. So there is a business to government data sharing, and there is a business to researcher data sharing. In business to government, you saw some example in the video. There is another example that we always refer to is the work that the team did directly with whales during the pandemic. And so it was actually government using some of the aggregated data from the maps that you get from Meta, understanding how people were reacting to the lockdown measures and the relaxing of the measure and so on to actually make more accurate decision. And in the B2R, I have so business to research. There is a very nice example. I think in 2021. Meta partnered with the Mercator Institute to actually make an analysis of the impact of the construction of bicycle lanes into city and actually see what is the impact once you start rolling out bicycle lanes, how does the traffic react, how do people react, and what is the sort of economic advantage that the creation bicycle lane generates for a city over a period of time. So I think if you look at that perspective under the principle of publishing relevant findings based on research, I think this is a great tool that shows a very nice alignment between the principles and the way some companies already operate when it comes to corporate social responsibility. There is another aspect, however, that is equally significant in Data for Good, and is actually the development of what we call privacy enhancing techniques, which I think looking at the booklet, it fall nicely in principle 1, embed data protection, fairness, and security in the design of processes. The program Data for Good is actually one of the test bed where we do use to develop what we call PET, privacy enhancing techniques. And we are working on mainly 3 privacy enhancing techniques. The first one is differential privacy. That is, how do you add noise basic statistical noise to a data set in order to make it even more robust when it comes to anonymization. And so all the work that we're doing in Data for Good is actually helping us developing this technique. The second is, federated learnings. That is similar. Like, how do we actually move to a world where there is more and more on-device processing, and that the data, you do not create necessarily like centralized data sets or centralized databases in server, but actually most of the processing is done on devices, and then only the insights are aggregated like centrally. That is also work that has been developed through this program. And then multi-party computation, same. So like the thing that I wanted to highlight here is that how actually by developing a program that is not commercially focused, is like purely related on giving back to society some of the value that is generated by the data, you actually also help increasing, the company ability or society's ability in the end to develop privacy enhancing technology. So I thought that this was like a first nice example of how the framework fits with some of the work that we're doing. I'll give you like a couple of other quick examples. The other thing that came to mind is Principle 5, awareness campaign for citizens with regard to data-centric society. And here, I think we have a very, very recent example. You may know, or you may not know, that Meta launched a few months ago, like a product called Ray-Ban Stories in partnership with Luxottica. That is like sort of, if you want, the first wave of digital glasses or like sunglasses. And in that case, what we did was to launch at the same time, or roughly at the same time, an awareness campaign. An awareness campaign in the media, in the press, at the radio, that is aimed at bystander. It's not aimed at people that actually buy the technology. It's not aimed at people that know the technology and want to adopt the technology, but it's actually aimed at everybody else. It's aimed at all the people that are going to be around the technology and are going to be living and growing up in an environment where that technology, AR, VR, and so on, exists. So I think this sort of campaign, I thought it was also an example that we can use to highlight the value of this sort of approach to data protection and privacy. Is an awareness campaign. Is not directly related to the marketing of the product, but actually is related to the people that are going to live and operate around the product, around the new technology that is coming to the market. And I'll leave you with a third thought that I think it's even more important if you look at probably a broader picture. That is Principle 1.5. The organization should adopt a business model that permits the fair use of data in a way that benefits society. And so there, I think I'm, for instance, very much convinced that ads-based business model do actually fit really well with this definition. Like if you think of the services that a company like Meta provide, or that every company that is offering a business model based on advertising provides, is providing free services to the user in exchange, of course, for the fact that the service is funded by advertisers. And so when it comes to the fair use, so if you think of the principle says there is a business model that permits fair use of the data in a way that benefits society. So when it comes to the fair use, you can actually develop, and we're developing more and more over the years as Meta, a number of privacy preserving technology, privacy controls that actually allows the user to be in control of what happens with this data on the platform. But the part that I would like to underline here is actually the impact on society of an ads-based business model. I think the fact that ads enable non-profit, social causes, organization to reach to people that are most likely to support the campaign, to look at the campaign, to support their small businesses, to buy from small businesses everywhere, actually unlocks massive amount of value for the society at large. And just to give you a couple of examples, every month there are more than 200 million small and middle-sized companies that do use Meta services to reach out to their customers. 62% of small businesses say that basically using this sort of ads-funded services is critical for their success, is critical to be able to reach the customer that otherwise they would never be able to reach through a standard paid-for marketing campaign in traditional media. And also, I'll close to give you like another example. I think, for instance, concerning charities. Meta ran an event called Giving Tuesday in 2021, which is a day when people all around the world come together to support causes that they like and donation. And so in one day, you had 1.5 million that started to donate through Facebook or Instagram fundraiser. And in one day, there is like 120 million USD to raise initiatives that benefit 100,000 organizations. And all this, it's possible only because the business model is an ads-based business model. And so I would say it's a very interesting reflection for all of us to do. If in the context of CSR and privacy, in the context of this debate, we actually recognize all the positive externalities that the ads-based business model can bring to society. And I think I can stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefano. And of course, last but not least, Sara, please.
Thank you very much. I believe you can hear me. Yeah. Yeah. Just first an introduction. I'm Sara Baki from the Rabobank. We're a Dutch bank mostly, and we operate globally as well. I'm particularly active in our security sector of the bank. So we deal with data and innovation and stuff like that. So from the outset, what we set out to do as a bank is make our mark in helping society, so not only ourselves to make our business better, but also to help our customers and then society at large, as you said so very well, Stefano. So at the outset, we always have an idea of if we produce something, a product or a service, how does it not only benefit us as an organization, but how can it improve the livelihood of our customers and beyond? So for this, we have a sort of internal compass of ideas that we have, ranging from contributing to our climate goals, to inclusivity, but also the fair use of data, personal data, business data, what have you. So within that thought, we created a sort of manifesto, if you will, in which we said pretty much the same thing as the DPCSR framework said. So that's the data belongs to the data subjects, or our customers. The data should benefit them. We should be transparent about it. And they should know that privacy and security is a given. It should be a given. So we set that out, and we had some goals in there in which we want to create products which will actually benefit them. So from a banking perspective, we want our customers to be financially healthy, to prevent them going bankrupt and have all the ramifications of such a personal situation. So an example of such an action would be a product we have called Funder. And what product does is for you as maybe a small business to ask for a loan and see what you can get. So we used AI, making sure that it's unbiased, of course, and see what you can get. So instead of going to the bank, handing in 20 documents in threefold and waiting for 3 to 4 weeks before you get an answer, we used AI to do that. And it was so successful because this saved these small businesses time. So the small business owner who doesn't have time because he has to do everything himself, he doesn't have 100 employees fixing everything for him. So what we saw there, it was so beneficial, the customers liked it that much, that this pilot became our standard. This is one way that we are helping our customers. Even when we talk about being in control of your own data, we make sure that the consent dashboard we use for our customers in their app is very clear. You know exactly what you can do, what you can subscribe to, and what not. Looking at the security side of things, my colleague puts this very well, because we always talk about security awareness, and I cannot not ever use the word awareness again, because he said, no, it's not only about awareness, we have to act a certain way. So we need to move towards secure behavior. And for that, we have campaigns running both internally and externally. Of course, we have the Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October, in which we deal with all sorts of cybersecurity subjects, also those pertaining to privacy. So what does that mean? That means that throughout the year, we not only look at our colleagues who need to be aware of these type of things when they create products or execute business processes within the bank, but also externally. So our local banks in the smaller cities within the Netherlands, we help our customers, but also prospect customers if you want, to help understand how they can keep their data safe. And this also goes for, of course, phishing campaigns within the bank, but also towards our customers. So we had all these type of activities that we're already doing, but we were missing this extra push. I don't know if you're aware of this, but banks are pretty much very heavily regulated, and we have to report to the ECB on a regular basis. So this runs the risk of treating privacy and cybersecurity as a compliance subject. So I'm going to be very, very rude about this, but the checking in the box activity. And that's something you don't want to do, because regulation is there to help us as an organization to stay aware of what the risks are. So this was a few years back, and I was thinking about it, and as fate would have it, I was at a DPO course, and I was talking to Professor Balboni, who had the exact same idea, with beautiful principles that matched our own principles as well. So we worked together on this project, and what we have seen also with our communications with other larger Dutch banks, and I'm assuming in the rest of Europe there are these cooperations between banks as well, is that it's very beneficial to know which data you can share with each other to improve secure behavior. I'm going to say behavior. To improve secure behavior not only with corporations but also with data subjects, meaning if they are aware and act in a certain way, and we ourselves do that as well, the products we create and the services we provide to our customers will improve as well. And we've seen that with some of the projects we have. I named a funder as well, and other activities that we are trying to do to ensure that we do process data in a fair way, that we get very good responses from our customers as well, and it generates this return on investment which you spoke about earlier, Paolo. So for us, this is the very key thing. And when I look at the project itself and the way we contributed, I must say our colleagues were very enthusiastic, because when we look at the transparency part, creating the icons, that was something for us which was very important. So if we do have products we have, like an internet banking app or of the sort, that we can indeed show them this is possibly what is happening with your data, and inviting our customer to go to our privacy statement and read how we are treating their data, also contributing to how big of a thing is privacy, because we all know the whole cookie story of just accept all cookies so I can see which clothes I want to buy. So that was really helping us, and also a way to clarify privacy statements or product statements with the larger icons we created with the contest. Really much helps keep the focus on the customer, and that's what we do with all our products now, going externally to make it very clear what we're doing in layman's terms, with the icons, with the data subject being in control. And we see that it very much benefited our operations. So that going forward, also in cooperation with our fellow banks in the Netherlands, we're going to pick this up to see how we can share our knowledge and, yeah, hopefully come to a standard on how to treat the GDPR and privacy in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much all for the contribution. Now I would like to welcome questions, remarks, be as critical as possible. This is just, the beginning of a conversation on CSR, and this is a first effort in terms of research, but now we also want to ask you your feedback in order to further improve and make it as right as possible, please. No.
I'll just speak up louder. It's the first time now I heard of this program this morning. I can immediately see one or two of our clients, I'm working for an information security consultancy, being interested in this. I would see considerably more if it would be certifiable, officially certifiable. What are the prospects there? That indeed you get some affordable certification program going, and within what time frame? Thanks.
Thank you very much. This was, I think, a recurrent question in our stakeholders group, because, of course, especially if organizations are investing to do this extra mile, they also want to be able to show it to the outside world. So first and foremost, more from the technical point of view, this will never be a certification under Article 42 of the GDPR, because it looks at something different. Certification according to Article 42 of the GDPR certifies single data processing activities against the GDPR requirements. Here we take GDPR compliance as granted, and then we want to go an extra mile. I don't think we will never qualify also for an Article 40 Code of Conduct. Because Article 40 Code of Conduct is more about specifying further the obligations within one sector, or working on adding additional requirements with respect to compliance with the GDPR. So the second point may be, what we are doing, but actually we want to play beyond the GDPR. And then I'm answering your question. So I think it was very interesting, among all the things that were said, what Massimo was saying about seeing CSR, data protection and CSR, as a potential connecting tissue between multiple dimensions. But I would also say by multiple countries. We are now focused on GDPR, but there are also places in the world with a very, very far less developed privacy framework. And if we have a common understanding on how to process personal data responsibly, we may be able to bridge that gap, for example, with our standard under the GDPR. But also with respect to public organization or private organization, and the interaction between organizations with privilege and immunities and the private sector that pose all the question on where the privilege and immunities will stop. Long story short, the certification is already in the pipeline. We are working on seals, so we're going to have two different seals. One is for self-assessment, the other one is for third-party assessment. How this will come? Self-assessment will come directly from the organization. We have indicated this figure within organization, which is mandatory, which is the Data Protection as a Corporate Social Responsibility Coordinator. In order to become a coordinator, you need to follow specific courses that we're going to provide at the center, the European Center on Privacy and Cybersecurity. Then this internal figure will be able to self-assess compliance with the 25 rules. Second seal, third-party assessment through accredited auditors, also following specific trainings by the ECPC. So will it be a certification? Yes. When this certification will be available, potentially Q4 of this year. The seal be able to be shared Q4 this year. And the seal of third-party certification Q1 next year. Will this be Article 42 certification of the GDPR? No. Why that? Because we aim to go beyond GDPR and beyond mere compliance. I hope this is an answer to your question, also with the rationale.
Perfetto, signore, grazie molto.
Prego, thank you. More questions. Also, come on, be also a little bit critic on this. We heard a lot of nice stories, but I want to hear bad stories about that.
So hi, it's Pat Walsh, Privacy Matters.
Yeah.
So I have a question in relation to this whole thing. So you've said beyond the GDPR. GDPR talks about DPIAs. To what degree does this model, and to what degree do all of you that are practicing this apply human rights impact assessments, which goes beyond? And a core component of that is stakeholder engagement, for example. Understanding the interests, the concerns, the worries, the risks perceived by communities. Because when I look at Meta, and that lovely, fluffy video of all the wonderful good that's being done. And then I hear that advertising, the privacy eroding behavioral advertising model that Facebook deploys, is considered to be a model that benefits society. What I'd like to know is to what degree then has Meta or any other organization that's doing this in practice deployed human rights impact assessments, and to what degree did Meta engage with communities, with stakeholders, to understand their needs, their perceived risks and concerns when you're sharing data with governments, for example, as we saw on the video. So I'd like to get a sense of that, because this is about people. It's not about a certificate or anything else, because tick box compliance, as we heard from the bank, doesn't cut it. Not when you're talking about real harms to people. And particularly when we think that in many of these countries that you're engaging in, particularly Meta, you showed Indonesia and other countries, people use mobile devices. They probably use the Meta app. Inside those apps is the SDK that does a lot of tracking. And inside many other apps, you will find Facebook Share, Facebook Logging, Facebook Analytics, embedded in this data vampire-infested ecosystem. So I'd like to know how you're dealing with those things. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pass it on to you, Stefano, and then I also want to address the question about human rights impact assessment within this framework. Please, Stefano.
I think the answer to the concern is definitely yes. I mean, if you look at the examples that we put in the video, that data is always shared like with third parties, with researchers. Is data that is aggregated, is never about individuals, and there is a lot of work that the team does and Meta does when it comes to the safety of people, the privacy of people, the human rights of people. So I think that definitely from that point of view, there is a way that you can develop technology that allows you to share data with third parties, in this case like researchers or like non-profits organization, to the benefit of society in a way that is privacy preserving. And that there is continuous engagement about that the team that develops the product does. So we can continue that discussion, but it's definitely something that it is possible to do.
So did you complete a human rights impact assessment, and have you published any of this methodology so that have you published the methodology so that it's open to public scrutiny?
I think there is a lot of information already available. If you go on the Data for Good page, that I think will help this discussion.
Okay, I also would like to point exactly to Principle 1, Rule 3, which is about fairness by design. I also was a little bit puzzled when Stefano mentioned we can, try to stimulate an improvement in our society, leveraging advertising, right? We all know, and as Pat mentioned, that behavioral advertising, programmatic advertising have been under the lens of supervisory authority. I think also rightfully, in terms of lack of transparency, lack of clearness, in terms of how many recipients of those data are involved. And therefore, I will be very keen to work with Meta and try to understand how we can make digital advertising a sort of engine which is also fair, but fair in a way that is transparently shown after a human rights impact assessment that will not harm individuals. Because I think here we really need to keep working on transparency and keep working on an agreed methodology on what is hampering and what is not hampering human rights and freedoms. This is exactly one of the most fundamental controls that we have in the framework, a human rights impact assessment, which is a portion, one of the steps in order to come out with compliance with Principle 1, Rule 3 on fairness by design.
Can I say
yes.
just one thing on the advertisement piece? Yeah. So I think we can discuss, and actually the discussion is ongoing, the enforcement is ongoing with the various DPA around the world. Like you can discuss the extent to which you want to apply data protection to the advertising ecosystem, the free ads ecosystem, that business model. And that discussion has been ongoing for many years. It will continue to be ongoing for many years. There will also be enforcement, there will be adjustment. The message that I wanted to give today was the fact that actually that business model, the business model based on free advertisement, has a very significant positive externality, or can have it in the right context if you want. And I think that is the part that I just don't want to be lost in this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a second, Massimo, one remark and then the last question, and then we need to wrap up, as I was informed.
Just a very, very quick thought, in the sense that, I mean, it's not for me to say, from my point of view, whether the advertising model is the right one or not, but this notion of really understanding, doing a careful analysis, engagement with people, enhanced transparency, awareness, balancing profits with the active benefits for citizens requires actually engagement to understand what the benefits might be and what benefits are perceived to be. And the fact that perhaps we're not necessarily talking about a blanket, the advertising model is right or it's not right. There might be situations and spaces where, because of the vulnerability of people, because of the specificity of the knowledge that can be extracted and used for the targeting, you might actually just decide that you don't want that space to be used for these purposes. So an ad-free space, not so much in the terms of not receiving advertising, but not having the data used for advertising. And it could be contextual, it could be for extreme circumstances, but that's the result of that analysis.
Thank you. Last question.
Thank you very much. I'm Alexis Ardiashvili from Leiden University. I'm researching behavioral advertising, so I will ask a question again about this. But firstly, I want to ask a question to the panel. In general, how do you define social good? Because I think the most important thing heard today was that advertising business model can be good for society, but then what's the good for society? Because the context that you said that was the wealth creation for small and medium-sized enterprises. And I think one of the biggest problems is the assumption that the wealth creation in that manner is the good for society. And disregarding things such as human autonomy or increasing capabilities, this is something that can be sidetracked. And my question is, to you all, to what extent you include in your framework things such as this, like when we're talking about advertisement, for example, you mentioned transparency as the major issue. Yeah. Is transparency the major issue, or is the issue that there are indeed vulnerable people whose psychological and physical aspects are being touched upon, and the way the internet is designed? Maybe that's the issue, what advertisement business model comes with. So the interface design or the constant addictive behaviors that are being exploited, and etc. So, what is the social good, and what are we after? Yeah?
Thank you. Just one quick answer from the panelist. Sophie.
I would like to perhaps make a focus on all the work done at the European level the last 2 years in building really a whole series of legislative initiatives to better regulate the digital environment. Social good is, for example, forbidding dark patterns, and that's done in the Digital Service Act. But you have also more major use of data and altruism data, and that's in the Data Governance Act, the Data Act, the Data Market Act too, and all these texts are not just multiplication of legal obligation, but really how to cope with our digital environment, the market, the practices, the dynamics, and how to rebalance the current asymmetries in the digital ecosystem. And so, as regulators, the GDPR was the first piece of this global framework. But now we have all the other pieces coming to try to create this new environment for a better regulation. And of course, the major concern we have dealing with these new options which are good, is to get consistency and the proper articulation between all those legislation, and to preserve and guarantee the fundamental right to data protection. So that will be really what we have in our focus.
Thank you. I'm just asking a couple of sentences because we need to wrap up. Stefano.
I would just say, let's discuss it. I mean, for me, this tool is one of the first tools that we have to start actually discussing about what is social good, and how we define and how we get to a common understanding. Maybe not a certification, as Paolo was saying, but how do we get? It's a journey. This is one of the many tools we can do it. Let's start a discussion as a society.
Thank you. Sarah.
Yeah, for us, if we are looking at what the bank does, we have a lot of topics we are working on, but if I answer your question directly, it would be mostly to keep our private clients and also corporate clients financially healthy, promoting their economy, but also the economies of their countries, and also for other banks, for instance in South America or in the Africas, to know how to offer loans to corporations there, so their local economies will grow as well. So that would be the larger goal for us.
Thank you. Massimo.
I don't have a very lengthy or detailed answer other than it's very contextual. And it's very contextual in the sense, and this is why we're thinking about a very tailored for humanitarian settings where, in the triangle, corporate legitimate interest, social good, and individual concerns, in extreme circumstances of humanitarian emergencies, the individual concerns are so primordial and really linked to the integrity, the physical and mental integrity of the individual, that in the analysis of what is social good, it really has to come to be in the equation strongly.
Thank you. Cosimo.
And really nothing to add, just to insist on one of what was pointed out by the first questions. We always, whenever we are working in this area, we make it always clear that sometimes I've observed myself that societal benefit, which is maybe somehow discussable because we cannot hide everything under the societal benefit. This does not exempt controller in any case to perform a serious privacy impact assessment. Otherwise, the risk for the individual will remain high. And I don't know. I think it's something which needs to be further elaborated, this part. Yeah.
Thank you. Just as a closing remark, to me, what is good for citizens, for people, is right to understand, right to choose, right to be treated well. And this is where we want to play our game. And I know it sounds very high level, but therefore we have created 25 rules and 5 principles with the ambition to have this action measurable and auditable. So thank you very much to all the panelists. I hope this is the beginning of an interesting discussion on this new dimension of data protection as a corporate social responsibility. Thank you also for your interaction, and enjoy the conference.
Thank you.